Okay, all right. So over on your screen there, you see Daniel Stone. Now, Daniel Stone, he grew up in the DC area. His parents were good, healthy atheists, and he had no religious background. But as typical of the 60s and 70s, which was like a very kind of tumultuous and also freewheeling time. Many of us came to Baba during that time, and that's when he started his search, not quite knowing what he was going to encounter. And but the after he got into Baba, we're going to hear that story. I know there was a backstory of how Kitty asked him, and if he would be the head of the form Baba group in D.C., which he kind of, I think, reluctantly did. But it was they had wonderful meetings for many, many years, and a lot of the Mandalay and everything shared their stories at his home and his then wife, Pamela. And he's been in the Baba world for quite a while, and you might say a kind of a war veteran, and he has come through unscarred, basically, or he's healed. Anyway, so he is leaving this open to questions. He's worked. He's been on the board at the center here, and also he's worked for the trust in India on putting together a future plan for Mehrabad and Merazad. They've called him in to help with that. So he welcomes questions, and so Daniel, uh, take it from there.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see some familiar faces and familiar names where I can't see faces, and then nice to see folks that I haven't gotten to know so far. So Jeff did ask me to tell my story of coming to Baba, and then to kind of leave it open for questions that you folks may have, or things you'd like to explore together. So I'm happy to do that with you. So as Jeff sort of laid the groundwork for it, but I came to Baba through kind of a long circuitous path. I know some people have come to Baba, stories I hear where they see Baba's face and they just know he's God, and they know he's the one for them, and that's that. And it's very simple and straightforward. And my way was not quite so simple and straightforward. So I did, as Jeff said, I grew up in kind of the 60s as in the hippie era. I went to a very liberal Quaker high school in Maryland. It turned out there were like about 100 kids in the school, and about 8 of us actually all became Baba lovers, not necessarily connected to each other. We just did, which is pretty high percentage of folks from a single school to become Baba lovers. But it was that kind of school. It was a truly Quaker kind of school. And so I went to that school, and I was going through a tumultuous time in my own personal life. My parents had gotten divorced. A very close person to me was killed in a car accident when I was 14, 15. So it was a challenging time in my life. And in that time, I was exposed to LSD, and I was I was toured on a LSD trip by my older brother. And it was a turning point in my life. I went really from a place of pretty deep depression into really uncovering this incredible experience of awakened consciousness. And it really lasted with me for a very long time. And I really saw that there was more to what it meant to be alive, to be a human being, than I had ever conceived of. And so that was my experience in my mid-teens. And so I continued in different kinds of paths. and wound up living in Boston. I went to school for a year and dropped out after a year. And it was during the Vietnam era. And so instead of going and serving in a battlefield position, I got a conscientious objector status, and was able to evade having to take up arms. And I did alternative service for 2 years, working in a hospital setting in the Boston area. And Boston at the time was very much of a kind of an epicenter of a lot of hippiedom, I guess would be the simplest way to put it. And so there were a lot of people searching at that time, and I was during that time exposed to the worlds of Eastern mysticism through things like transcendental meditation, which I did for quite a period of time, and was exposed to different kinds of yoga and Buddhism. Took workshops with people like Yogi Bhajan and Philip Kapleau and things like that. And so I was really searching for, and I realized during that time that these were ways to achieve higher states of consciousness naturally and more profoundly. And so I switched my interest from psychedelics to the pursuit through Eastern mystical pursuits. And during that time, I belonged to a food co-op in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I was living. And somebody there gave me a copy of the discourses. And by that time, I'd done a fair amount of reading of different masters. And so I had an idea about kind of the different people's points of view and different people's expression. And when I read the discourses, I was deeply impressed that here was somebody, rather than somebody who seemed like he was theorizing about these higher states, this was somebody who actually knew the experience of these higher states and was simply conveying them back to me or back to whoever the reader was. And there was an authority in it I had not found anywhere else. So I was deeply impressed with what I read of Baba, but I couldn't figure out any methodology associated with Baba. And I tried to figure it out. Like, what do you do when you're a Baba lover? Like, what difference does that then start to make in your life? And that was not apparent to me. So I kind of set Baba aside at the time, but kept him in the back of my mind. Another thing that happened to me during this period was I went to see a talk. This was about 1970 or 71. I went to see a talk by Ram Dass. He was called Baba Ram Dass at the time. Many of you probably know who he is. He was formerly Richard Alpert, and then he was an associate of Tim Leary's at Harvard. And they were major experimenters and writers and figures in the whole psychedelic movement. And he had left Timothy Leary's grasp and gone to India, and he found a master. And so he was giving talks about his experiences in India at the Arlington Street Church in Boston. And so I went to see him one night. He was just back from India giving these talks. And he talked about his master. And I was very, very taken with his master. And I thought, I would love to meet this man. But Ram Dass gave no identifying information about who he was. And those of you who read, he wrote a book later on called Be Here Now. He had not written that book by that point in time. And even in the book, he does not reveal any information about his master. He doesn't give his name. He doesn't give his location. He's clearly not, it seemed it was pretty clear he was under orders not to divulge anything about him. So I didn't know what to make of that, but I was very, very drawn to him. So the two people in my life at that time that I was very drawn to was Ram Dass's master and Meher Baba. But I couldn't figure out Meher Baba, and I couldn't figure out how you would find this master of his. And so I kind of put them both on a shelf at the time. So I completed my work, my conscientious objector alternative service in Boston in 1970, in late 1971. And I had a girlfriend in England at the time. And I decided that I would, I, I didn't, I left my job. I wasn't interested in staying there any longer. I wasn't going to school. I had no obligations. I'd saved up a little bit of money. And so I decided I would travel to Europe and I'd go visit my girlfriend and I'd travel around Europe. I wasn't finding any really foothold in any spiritual path at that point in time. So I decided to kind of wrap up things in Boston. My family lived in Washington, so I packed everything up in my car, drove down to Washington, and I was going to leave everything with my parents, and then get on a plane and go to Europe. So I got to Washington, and one of the first things I did in Washington was I contacted a friend of mine, one of my best friends from the Quaker high school I'd been to. His name was Steve. And Steve had actually become a Baba lover in the period of time. Actually, we'd lived together for a while in Cambridge, then he moved back to Washington. And I was the one who actually told him about Baba, but he had become a Baba lover. And this was January of 1972. And he was just planning his first trip to the Mayor Center. And he wanted me to go with him. And so I was a little bit reluctant to go because I was getting ready to get on a plane and go to Europe. But I thought, okay, you know, he twisted my arm just enough to get me to agree to go. So he and I traveled down to the center in Myrtle Beach. And he didn't really know much about the center. He didn't even know you could stay on the center. So we actually spent the first night that we were there in a campground next to the center, sleeping in the car, very, very cold. And then we went to the center the next day. We found out we could actually stay on the center. And so we shifted over there. And I found the center very beautiful. It had a wonderful feeling to it, but I couldn't make heads nor tails of the people. That the people that were Baba lovers there, that they all seemed to have a relationship with Baba, and I couldn't figure out what the basis was of that relationship. Like how could they say things like, well, Baba misplaced my keys for me today, or however they personalized the relationship, it just didn't make any sense to me. So I was kind of confused and put off by that. So one of the days we were there, we had an appointment to see Kitty, and I'm sure that there's some of you on the call who have met Kitty, but if not, she was Kitty. Kitty was a very long-term follower of Baba's. She had met Baba in 1932 in England, at 31 in England, and actually the first night that Baba spent in England, he spent at her family's house in London, and she'd become a very close follower. She lived with Baba in India from 1937 until 1952. And she traveled with Baba on his first visit to the center in 1952. And at the very end of that visit, Baba asked Kitty if she would stay on at the center to help Elizabeth run the center. And so Kitty had agreed. Kitty Kitty said, yes, of course. And Kitty was 100% obedient to Baba. And so she stayed there from 1952 until she died in 1991 at the age of 100. And by the way, she's buried just just down from Baba's tomb, on Mara's side of the tomb, just on that row of women. So she's very, very close forward. But at any rate, I didn't know any of this about Kitty. I'm just giving you a little backstory so you have a sense of her. She was about 80 years old at the time. And so everyone who went to the center at that time, pretty much everybody would be asked to see Kitty. And so we were given an appointment. We went over to Kitty's office, which was in the house that's called Dilruba. That's where Kitty and Elizabeth lived. And she had a little office there, and we went in the office and sat with her. And my impression of Kitty was she was a very nice old lady. Just a normal, nice old lady. And so we're sitting there and she's kind of giving us an interview. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm just there, as a sidekick to my friend Steve. I mean, he's the Baba lover. I'm just kind of, just a hanger on at that point. So, Kitty asked Steve, a little bit about himself and who he was and what he was doing in his life. And then she turned to me and she said to me, so, what are you doing in your life? And I said, well, I'm getting ready to go to Europe and travel around Europe for a while. And Kitty kind of looked at me, very, very seriously. And she said, you know, I think you're looking for something. And I thought, who is this old lady kind of trying to get in my head? It's like, I felt a little bit like stay out. But I didn't say that. I sort of said, well, maybe I am. So we went on talking for a while, and she went back and talked to Steve, and then she came back and focused on me. And she looked at me again and she said, I think you're looking for something. And I think if you go to Rishikesh in India, you'll find what you're looking for. Now, I didn't know what to make of that. I actually knew a little bit about Rishikesh at the time. I knew that Rishikesh was it was where the Ganges comes out of the Himalayas. It's a place that there are lots of yogis and saints and sadhus and people living in caves and ashrams. Like, I knew that much about Rishikesh from having read the book Autobiography of a Yogi, but I didn't know what to make of her telling me to go there. So I said to her, well, maybe I'll go there. I said, I don't know, Kitty. I said, I think I'm going to go to Europe anyway. And she said, well, if you go to Europe, make sure you go to the spiritual places that Baba told us about in Europe. And Baba told them that there were four particularly spiritual places in Europe that were important to go to. And St. Mark's was one, Avila was one. I'm trying to remember the other two. I don't recall them, but there are two others. Jeff, you may know what they are.
Saint Catherine of Siena.
Yeah,
What-
there's anyway. There's a couple of other places that she said that Kitty said that Baba said were important, significant spiritually, and she also gave me contact information for her family members and invited me to look her family up. So that was the end of the interview, and I didn't know what to make of it. So we finished our time at the center, and we were driving back home a couple of days later, and I was sitting next to Steve. Steve was driving the car, and I was just thinking about the events at the center, and all of a sudden, like a thunderbolt entered me, and I knew deeply, intuitively, that she was right, exactly right, and that I should go to Rishikesh. And so I turned to my friend Steve and said, Steve, I'm going to Rishikesh. And so the next week, I packed everything up and I flew to England. Or I think I already had a flight at that time. I flew to England, spent some time with the woman I was involved with at the time, and basically ended the relationship with her because I wanted to be free when I went to India. I didn't want to have any obligations that I was leaving behind because I didn't know if I'd ever come back. And so then I traveled overland to India, and my only guide for traveling overland to India there was a very popular book at the time called The Last Whole Earth Catalog. And some of you old hippies know that book well, but it was kind of a resource book for all kinds of alternative lifestyle kinds of stuff about organic farming and communal living and all kinds of interesting stuff. And there was a half-page article called something like an overland trip to Kabul or something, or to Kathmandu. And it was a half page, and I ripped it out of the Last Whole Earth catalog. And that was the only thing I knew about how to get to India from Europe. But I embarked on a trip, and I went from England into Europe and spent a little bit of time in Amsterdam, and then to Munich, and then to Istanbul, which is really where what's called the hippie trail kind of started. And went to Istanbul, and I happened to meet up with a number of German and other Europeans that had a Mercedes bus that they were traveling to Kabul in Afghanistan, and so I joined them. I think it was they were going to charge $35 to go from Istanbul to Kabul on this bus, and so I got on the bus and traveled with them, and we got I think a day and a half out of Istanbul into the town of Samsun, which is on the Black Sea, when the bus broke down. And anyway, I'm not going to go into the whole story about getting there, but the bus broke down. I ended up leaving the bus and hitchhiking from there to, I think, to Erzurum, Turkey, and then across Turkey, and then took buses and trains across Iran into Afghanistan, and then across Afghanistan. And finally, because the border was closed at that time with Pakistan, India flew over the border into the Punjab, into Amritsar. And from there, I decided before I was going to go to Rishikesh, I wanted to see a little bit of India. So I went up to Kashmir for a couple of weeks, and then I went to Kathmandu with somebody I met there, and we decided to do a trek. So the trek we did was a trek out of Pokhara Valley that went up to the Tibetan border. It was called the Jamsen Trek, and it had just opened up for the first time to Westerners. So it was very, very primitive, and it was about 150-mile trek up through the Annapurna Range. And so we were trekking there, and it was a place where there was no commercial activity. There were no hotels, no restaurants, nothing like that. You'd get to a little village somewhere, you'd knock on somebody's door, and you'd show them with hand gestures you wanted something to eat, and they'd invite you in, and they'd feed you for a few rupees, and you could sleep on their floor, and then you'd go off the next day. So it was a very, very rustic kind of trek. So one day we were trekking, and we stopped along the side of the path, and this man shows up. He looked like he was, from South America or Central America, long hair, hippie looking guy. And he sits down next to us, and we get to talking. And I think his name was something like Carlos. And it turned out, he tells us, that he had just been spending time with this great master named Neem Karoli Baba. And Neem Karoli Baba, it was Ram Dass's guru. And that was the first time I found out the name of Ram Dass's guru. And he told me that he'd been spending time with it. He'd been part of a satsang, or community, small community of people who were hanging out with Neem Karoli Baba. And he told me how to find him. And that was the first I knew about that. So that was very interesting to me. I made note of it. So then I finished the trek, and then found my way eventually to Rishikesh. And being in Rishikesh was a friend of mine was recently in Rishikesh, and it sounds like it's turned into a kind of a yoga supermarket kind of environment. But back then it was very, again, it was it was small. It was just like a big village, a lot of sadhus, a lot of ashrams, a lot of things like that going on. And so I hung out there, and, checking out different ashrams in different places, trying to figure out, is there anything here for me? And I was there for a while, and I couldn't find anything that really held my interest, that seemed like it was, that had anything meaningful for me. So I started to despair of being able to actually find something. And I almost got to the point of saying, something, I should really bag this whole thing and just go back to the West and find another way forward. But then it occurred to me that before I did anything else, in terms of sort of drawing any final conclusion about what might be available, I should really try to find a living master. And so then I realized that Neem Karoli Baba was actually very near Rishikesh. And near in those days meant maybe a day's journey by state transport bus. So I found out that he was outside of a town called Nainital, which is a hill station up in the north of India, not far from Rishikesh. So I decided to go to Nainital and find Neem Karoli Baba. So I did travel to Nainital, and then from Nainital, I found Neem Karoli Baba was in a village called Kanchi, about just 45 minutes by bus outside of Nainital, down a valley. So I went and I found, I took the bus, I found somebody who told me how to find him. I took the bus, I went down to the village of Kanchi and went to his temple. It's a Hanuman temple there in that area, and it wasn't a big temple. There were a number of Westerners there. I'd say maybe 15, 20 Westerners living there at the time or hanging out there. And I met Neem Karoli Baba, and I had his darshan. And my first darshan with him was uneventful. I went into a room where he was with some of his Indian devotees, and he was sitting there. And if you don't know what he was like, if you've never read Be Here Now, he was an old man with a, which I can show you a picture of him. Hang on just a moment, I'll show you a picture.
Interesting.
Can you see that? Yeah, let's see. There he is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's old man sitting, and he was always wrapped in a blanket. That's what he always looked like. And so he only spoke Hindi. He didn't speak English. So I met him, I bowed down, I did whatever we did at the time. And then he sent me away. He sent me out of the room. But I was welcomed by the group there, by what they call the satsang. Satsang is a community of devotees, of the Western devotees. Ram Dass was not there at the time. I think there may have been some other people. Krishna Das might have been there. I can't remember if that was one of the people there. Some of you may know who he is. But at any rate, I was invited to join the satsang and be part of that group. And so I did. And I became a member of that community for, I don't know, a period of time. And I found a place to stay and would join them. And every morning we would go down, and we were staying up in Nainital, so we take the bus down and we get down to the temple at about 6 a.m. And he would come out, and he would come out, he would sit on a little, what's called a tucket, which is a little kind of a flat, low flat platform, I guess, but small, like a couch thing, but without anything on it other than a board. And he would sit there wrapped in his blanket, and we would sit around him, the 15 or 20 of us that were there. And we'd have darshan with him for a couple of hours, and we would just sit there. And the darshan would be nothing in particular. Sometimes he would ask us to do some chanting. It was all Ram Ram, Jai Ram kind of chanting. And sometimes he would just be off in a very different place and just seemingly staring off into space. And where he was in his consciousness, I can't tell you, but he was somewhere. And then sometimes he would interact with us, but he would never, he didn't do any teaching, he didn't do any lecturing. And when he would interact with us, it all had to be translated. And so, and he didn't directly interact with me more than once or twice during the whole time I was with him. But the experience of being with him was absolutely extraordinary. And he gave me an experience of awakening inside my heart that was like it was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. It was at levels and depths that were way beyond anything I'd experienced on LSD or anything else in terms of awakening of consciousness and awakening of the heart. But it had nothing to do with any words he used or any techniques he was having us do, or any fasting or meditation or prayers or yoga or anything like that. And his whole approach was called Guru Kripa. And Guru Kripa means to be in the presence of the Guru and to receive the grace of the Guru. And that was understood. And I don't know what other people's experience was, but that was certainly my experience with him. And it was the fulfillment of everything I'd ever been looking for. So I stayed with them for a while. But over time of being with him, almost everybody there who was part of the satsang had accepted him as their master. And I never felt that he was my master. And it wasn't that I ever felt that he wasn't my master, but it was like I could never honestly say to myself, I'm his disciple. And he gave many of the people their names. Of course, we know Ram Das, Krishna Das, Jai Uttal. There are lots of people who are pretty well known who were associated with him. And many other people, not just well-known people, but there are a number of people. But I never felt that from him, and I never certainly got a name from him. And over time, I started feeling a restlessness inside myself, like I can't really stay with him, that I can't, I need to go. And maybe what I need to do is just simply go away for a while and come back. And so that's what I decided to do. But then the question was, where should I go? And I didn't really have a good idea about where to go, but I started getting little things be dropped into my in my direction that seemed to indicate where I should go next. One of them was the book Life at Its Best showed up, which I'd never seen before. And so I read it while I was there, and it had a very deep impact on me. And I could really feel the truth in that book. So that was, again, a reawakening of a connection with Baba. And then another thing that happened was I used to sometimes wear a Baba button around. My friend Steve had given me a button, so I used to wear it sometimes. And one day, a number of us went into Delhi from Nainital. Different ones of us had different business to do in Delhi. I had a little bit of business to do there myself. And so we all went together to Delhi, and we agreed that we'd meet for lunch at a Chinese restaurant in the center of Delhi in Connaught Place. And the place we were going to meet was in a restaurant that was off the lobby of a hotel. And so that day I happened to be wearing my Baba button for some reason. And I did my business in the morning, and then I walked over to the hotel and walked through the hotel lobby, and then started walking into the restaurant. And all of a sudden I heard this man behind me say, "Jai Baba." And I thought, okay, who are you? And it turned out it was Jal Dastur.
Oh.
Because Jal was on a business trip with James Cox, who was his business partner. And they just happened to be checking out of the hotel when he saw me walking through there, and he saw the Baba button. So he wanted to know, wanted to know who I was. And so I told him who I was, and I told him I was, he asked me what I was doing. I said I was with Neem Karoli Baba. And so he said, well, there's a wonderful place in Ahmednagar, outside Ahmednagar, called Mehrabad, that you might really enjoy coming to sometime. And so he was very warm and welcoming of inviting me to go down there. So I logged that in the back of my mind. So and again, there were a couple of other things like that happened while I was there. So I went back up to Nainital, and I was back with Neem Karoli Baba. And then as the restlessness that I felt increased, and I was trying to figure out where to go, the only thing I could think of was to go to Maribod. There were enough of these little indicators to say this is the place to go. So I didn't really know what that was about, but I thought, okay, well, what I think I'll do is I'll leave here, I'll go down to Maribod, I'll stay there for a couple of weeks, then I'll come back. That was my plan. So I left there, and I went to Delhi, and then went from Delhi, I went to Nasik because I'd heard that there was a course in Vipassana Buddhist meditation that a man named Goenka was giving in Nasik for a 10-day course. And I had heard great things about the course, so I decided to take the course, which I did. And then from there, then went on to Nagar. And I arrived in Nagar the evening of July 12th of 1972. And I know it was July 12th because I was let off by the bus just opposite the trust office, the trust compound. And when I walked in there, there were a number of people over at the Sarosh Canteen, which was just outside the trust office. And in amongst those people was Adi Kairani, Baba's secretary. So I met Adi, and I met a number of the people that were there at the time. And they helped me get a room in the luxurious Dalat Hotel, which if any of you ever stayed there, you can appreciate all the luxury of that experience. And I then joined the group of folks that were there, the Baba lovers, and I started joining them, going out to the Samadhi for arti, and I started going to Merazad and sitting with the Mandali and sitting in Mandali Hall with Erich and Mani and meeting Mara and all the people that were there at the time. But I had the same experience of the Baba lovers that I'd had at the center, which was I couldn't figure out kind of what was the method, what was this all about, and now I even had even more chips on my shoulder because I'd just been with the living master. And so I thought, I've just come from a living master, and here these guys are all, hanging around a grave site. What's this really all about? So but I had said to myself, okay, I'm going to stay here for 2 weeks. I sort of made that commitment to myself. So I continued going out to Merazad and to Maribod. So one day, I went out to Merazad, and in those days, many of us took the state transport bus, the ST bus, kind of the dirty red rundown buses that you still see in India, and they would take them down the road, and they drop us off at the end of the approach road to Merazad, about a half mile, 3/4 of a mile approach road, and so they dropped us off there, and I was walking up the road, and I was trying to make some sense out of my experience of being there. And I thought, what? I was saying to myself, and this is all going on inside of me. I'm saying to myself, why am I here? Like, what am I doing here? And I thought, I still have no idea what it means to have a relationship with Baba. And then I remembered something that Erich had said in the hall the day before. That Erich had said that having a love affair with Baba, that Baba had said, having a love affair with him happened in a way just opposite to how love affairs happen in the world. That in the world, Baba said, you meet somebody and you fall in love with them. And then you can't get them out of your mind. You're thinking about them all the time. But Baba said with him, the way you fall in love with him is you start out by thinking about him all the time, and then you fall in love with him. And I thought, so I said to myself, I was thinking to myself, well, I'm going to be here for 2 weeks. I've never really had an idea about how to approach Baba. Maybe that's the way to try it. I said, just try it. See what. So I said, I'm going to be here for 2 weeks. Let me try thinking about Baba for 2 weeks and see if anything comes of it. So then I asked myself, though, but how do you think of Baba? And I said, well, the only thing that I can gather from what I've from everything I know, is to say his name. So I started, and again, I'm just walking down the approach road, and I start saying Baba's name inwardly. And the moment I start saying Baba's name, the floodgate completely opened of Baba's love, and it just completely flooded over me. And it was the exact same experience of love that Neem Karoli Baba had awakened in me. There was absolutely no difference in that experience from what Baba gave me, except that there was the imprimatur from Baba that he was my master. And I knew that immediately from the feeling of that. And it was completely overwhelming to me. And so, and that experience stayed with me for quite some time with Baba. And so I ended up not going back to Neem Karoli Baba, because I realized that Neem Karoli Baba I'd been connected to him so that he could then guide me and bring me to Baba. So that's the story of how I came to Baba. So,
You know, I think you mentioned to me one time you had a thought, is he one of the 5 perfect masters?
yeah.
Neem Karoli Baba.
Yeah, so, well, there are a couple of things about Neem Karoli Baba that are important, I think, at least to me. I mean, if, you know, at least interesting, let's call it interesting. Ram Dass, Ram Dass was very connected to Meher Baba. I don't know if you all know that, but he had a very deep connection with Baba. Baba put a lot of focus on him. I mean, if you really think about it, at least when I really think about it, Ram Dass wrote that book, Be Here Now, and it sold 2 million copies, which is, I think, way more than any other book of its type has ever sold. And it was like a Bible. I mean, just show of hands, how many of you have read that book? I mean, I mean, just look at the hands. It's just, so many of us got that exposure, from Ram Dass. So Baba, it seems to me that Baba really used Ram Dass, as a major force to open up kind of this whole Eastern path that's led so many of us to Baba. So, but Ram Dass had a very deep connection with Baba and had a lot of correspondence with Baba, and it's all documented in Lord Mayher. You can find it there. But then Baba gave him certain instructions, and because Ram Dass said he wanted to be a follower, and Baba gave him some instructions, and Ram Dass chose not to follow the instructions, and they had to do with, I think Baba allowed him to take two or three more LSD trips, and Ram Dass went beyond that, and so he ended up not staying with Baba. And then he found Neem Karoli Baba. But he always had, I think, always in the back of his mind, like, who is this Meher Baba guy? And he kept wondering, like, who is he? And so he would ask Neem Karoli Baba, like, who is Meher Baba? And Neem Karoli Baba would never answer him. Neem Karoli Baba wasn't one to sort of just give in to people's urges. He was a very, he wasn't like that. But so he wouldn't answer him until one day Ram Dass asked him one more time, who is Meher Baba? And I have this on I've heard this story from a couple of people who have heard it directly from him. It's a little different from what's in his autobiography, I just want to say, but I heard it from 2 people who knew Ram Dass quite well, and they confirmed this story. In fact, they told me the story, that Neem Karoli Baba said to Ram Dass, if you must know, Meher Baba is your real master, and he's also my master. So, so that's one of the stories. Jeff, the story you're asking about, was a story of a guy, and I have this on really good confirmation also from a guy named John Welshons, Ramananda John Welshons, some of you may know him, that uh, a guy named Tom, I'm forgetting his last name, but he'd been a Baba lover and then had traveled from Mehrabad up to Nainital and had become a follower of Neem Karoli Baba's. And he actually arrived there when I was staying there, and he stayed with him. He's still with him, as far as I know. But Tom had been a Baba lover for a long time. And so Tom was with Neem Karoli Baba one day, and Neem Karoli Baba was sitting on his tucket, and he was just sitting there wrapped in his blanket, and Tom is thinking to himself, I wonder if he, meaning Neem Karoli Baba, I wonder if he could be one of the perfect masters. I wonder if he could be a perfect master. And at the moment Tom had that thought, Neem Karoli Baba turned directly to him and went like this, which I take as, he's saying 5 perfect masters, it was a clear enough signal to me. And Neem Karoli Baba does meet, in my reading of what Baba said, all of the criteria for a perfect master. So it would seem very, it seems to me that he is very likely a perfect master, was a perfect master.
Yeah, I think I heard that Padre had said there's one of them up in North India.
Yeah, he did. He did. He did. And I think that's who he was referring to. Yeah. Anyway, a really amazing experience being with him. So that's the story, a bit circuitous, I would say. One of the, I told that story, Avatar's Abode, at the Springs of Havas a couple of years ago, a few years ago. And I don't think I was asked to say this, but I made a couple of observations about it. I said one of the things, there were 2 things that really are so clear to me from that experience, apart from the obvious one, Bob is my master and Bob is the one. But there are 2 other things that I think are really important, have been important to understand for me. And I think they're important things to understand. It's important, I think, to really understand that a relationship with a master is always based on connections, and that you don't get, like Elizabeth would say, nobody walks onto the Mayor Center without a personal invitation from Baba. Something like that, Jeff. I think it's something like that. And it was so clear to me with Neem Karoli Baba that there were people who would come to see him who would feel nothing, and who would be, they were doing the guru trip around India and looking for different gurus, and they'd find him and they'd go there and they'd be there for a couple of days and they'd have no experience whatsoever and they'd walk away. And there were other people that would show up, and the minute that they walked into the temple grounds, they would be on their knees weeping from the experience of being there. And it seemed very clear to me that that's all about connections. And I think that was so true with Baba too. And, that there were people, and it's so true about even, today, people that go to Mehrabad, or people that go to, to the center, or go to Mairstana in Hamirpur. You have to have a connection with Baba to get to these places. And if you don't have it, it simply doesn't happen. So that's one thing that's really clear. And another thing that's really clear to me, and this is me based on my own personal experience, is that, Baba talks in the discourses about the need for a living perfect master. And I would say, from my own experience, that my connection with Neem Karoli Baba had nothing to do with his body. That there was absolutely nothing about his about the the interactions we had, about anything that he said, anything like that that had anything to do with what the inner experience was about being with him. And I'd say my experience with Baba is it's as intimate, or over years more intimate than that was. And that had, again, obviously it's not, I came to Baba after he dropped his body. As I think everybody I know of on this call came to Baba after he dropped the body. That the relationship with a true master has nothing to do with the body. And I think what Baba wrote in the discourses about that is, Baba said the discourses were really, he told Don Stevens, they were not written for this era. They were written for the era after which that the potency of the avatar's advent has waned, and it's to provide sort of the guidance for posterity that's going to be necessary for people to grow and advance spiritually in that era. But that what he says about need for a living perfect master is true, except in the case of the avatar. It is not applicable to that relationship. And I'd say to me, that's not theoretical. That was my total experience there. So I'd say those two things are really very clear things out of how I came to Baba that will always stay with me.
Yeah, beautiful. Any questions that you folks have? Ah, you got one up there from Australia.
Hey Daniel, can you hear me?
Hey, Josh.
Yeah, we met ages ago back in 2016, right when sort of when the government cancelled the rupee notes and they had to do that whole
Oh, yeah,
fiasco.
yeah.
That was ages ago.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And Trump was elected, don't forget.
Yes,
The same
on
night.
that day. Yeah. I was wondering what your life has been with Baba since you've come to Baba, it sounds like you had a really big journey coming to Baba, and what's it been like since then? Like, have you sort of had like an easy time? Have you had a rough time? Has it been, you had lots of doubts? Have you always had conviction? Has it been, what kind of flavors would you say that you feel in your daily connection to Baba with him over the years?
Wow, Josh, that's a great question. I've been with Baba for 50 years now, so it's a lot to encapsulate in a short answer. I've gone through lots of experiences. I went through a 22-year marriage and then a divorce, and then I've been in another marriage for 10 years, and and I've had a whole professional life and a consulting life, and as Jeff said, I started the Baba Group in Washington and kind of led it for 20, 25 years. And, I spent, 8 years or so involved in Sufi healing work. I'd say it's been a process of transformation, is what I'd say. I'd say Baba, trying to think how to give you a trajectory on it rather than just a series of events. I think I felt like Baba allowed me to grow in certain dimensions of my life. Very, he allowed me to grow, especially in my professional life. I'm an organizational consultant, so I had a lot of experiences, growing that way. And then I hit a place where the entire foundation of my relationship with Baba had to change, is what I'd say. A real crisis point. And it's when my marriage came apart, and I really had, I think Baba allows things to fester until they grow. I'll give you a metaphor for it. when I was in Myrtle Beach in 1972 or 73, I developed a boil on one of my legs. And I don't know if any of you ever had a boil, but they're really painful. I mean, really painful. And this one got worse and worse. And it got to the point where it's really even hard to walk because it was on my calf. And so I went to see a doctor about it. And the doctor looked at it, and it was bright red. It was really looked terrible. And the doctor looked at it and he said, you know something, I'm not sure that boil's ready to be lanced. He said, I'll lance it for you, but I'm not sure it's ready to be lanced. But we'll try. And so he lanced it. And sure enough, it didn't get any better. It was still painful. And so he said to me, wait till it turns black, and then we can really deal with it. And so a number of very painful days later, it turned black. And I went to the hospital, and it took them about 45 minutes to lance it and to deal with it. And then it was fine, and it's left a scar. I think that's a pretty good metaphor, for what my own experience has been like with Baba, is that I think he allowed me to go for a long time, letting certain characteristics in me grow that needed to get more and more. I'm going to use the word mature, but I don't mean that in the positive sense of the word mature. I mean, it needed to grow and grow until it was completely, that all the poison was right there. And then it was ready to be lanced. And it was incredibly painful, just to say this, when I went through that. But I will say Baba has, in my experience, and I'm not the only one who's felt this, and I know it's almost a truism with Baba, that I felt like he holds us in one, he puts us through it with one hand and he holds us with the other hand. And during that, he brought people into my life to support me and who acted as healers for me. And he created certain circumstances in my life that kind of created a bubble around me so that I could go through the healing process. And I'd say I went through about a 5 to 7 year healing process at that point in time that was enormously painful. And it was when I was in my about 50 or 50, early 50s, something like that. That was like, I could never describe the amount of pain it was, but it was the most productive time spiritual I've ever been to. And I also went through a period of tremendous conflict with Bao. And Bao, who I'd been very close to, Bao had stayed at our house many times, and I was very close with Bao, and he was very, very disapproving of me and of my decision to leave my marriage, and he was very public about it, and so it was extremely difficult. But it was Baba's blessing that he did that, because I really got to a point where I knew that I had too much of my relationship, my own self relationship was based on how I thought I was being perceived by other people, and by the support I got from them, by the affirmation I got from them, and it really, there's a woman named Carolyn Myss, or MYSS. You all know who she is. She wrote a book about the chakras, and it was a really fascinating book. And it came to me, it's like one of these things that Baba gave to me at just the right moment, that book. And she talked about the transition of consciousness across the chakras. And she said the transition from the third chakra to the fourth chakra is the third chakra, she said, is about our attachment to how we're perceived in the world by others. And the fourth chakra, of course, is the heart. And she said the transition from one chakra to the next, that the transition from the third chakra to the fourth chakra is the most difficult and the most painful transition to make of all the transitions. And she said anyone who thinks that they don't care about how other people see them haven't been through that transition, because she said it's like getting, like being skinned alive. And I can say that that's exactly what it felt like. And it was bloody. It was, the buckets of tears that ran through me. It's like nothing, and I'd been through difficult experiences before that. So this was not the first difficult time I've been through, but this capped them all, so, and then out of that, and when I said Bao was brutal. It was brutal what I went through. I mean, he would have these public talks in the Mayor Pilgrim Center with 60 people, and he would make these sit in front of him. And one day he went 20 minutes over the end of his talk, just berating me publicly in front of 60 people. And Susie Bidou, who had spent a lot of time with Bao, she said afterwards she'd never seen Bao do that to anybody, what he did. But I think the next year or two, sometime after that, I went into Bao's office. It was just me and him. And I said to Bao,
You're muted, Daniel. So you might have to say it again.
Oh, Daniel, we can't hear you.
Yeah, you can hear me now.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Did you hear me? I was in Bao's office. Do you hear that part?
Yeah.
And I said to Bao, I've got two choices in my life. I said, I can listen to your voice or I can listen to Baba's voice. Which voice do you think I should listen to? And of course, he didn't answer to me because the answer is obvious to that question. But it was the pinnacle of that experience, of the learning from that experience, was to be able to articulate that as the core dilemma that I was facing in my life. And that fundamentally changed my life. When I started going through that whole series, that experience that I just described to you, and the very early stages, I bought a deck of angel cards. You all know what these little angel cards are. You've all seen them. They all have different qualities of the angels on them, and you can sort of pull them out and think, maybe angels told you which card to pull or what have you. Well, I pulled a card out at that time, and I want to tell you so you're clear on this. This was a brand new deck, and it had never been used before, never been touched. Right out, and I pulled the card Transformation, and it was singed around the edges. I can show it to you. I have it downstairs. It's singed around the edges.
You mean it came newly sold, but with
all I can tell you was it was a brand new deck and it was singed around the edges, and that's what it is. And the Sufis, I spent, as part of my healing process, I spent several years studying Sufi healing from a Sufi foundation. And within Sufism, the path is seen as an alternation between what they call the Jamal and the Jalal. And the Jamal is called the garden. And we, when we're in the honeymoon with Baba, and we're having a really great, I just had an incredibly wonderful trip to India, just in December, November, December. Just, it's all the garden. The Jalal is the fire. And we know about Jamali musts and Jalali musts. That's the same terminology there. But from the Sufi perspective, all real growth comes through the Jalal. It doesn't come in the Jamal. The Jamal is what you do to build up the capacity to endure the Jalal. But the path, the real spiritual path, is about the Jalal from a Sufi perspective. And we know the term Fana Falah from Baba, which means the final annihilation. Well, from a Sufi point of view, the entire path is a series of fanas, a series of annihilations. And annihilations is just another word for the Jalal. So anyway, Josh, that's a long answer to your question, but I hope I did justice to it.
No, beautiful, really.
Mm.
Van?
Hi, this is a wonderful talk, Daniel. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
When you just made the comment to, I think it was Erich, whose voice should I listen to, yours or Baba's?
Yeah, the bow.
I mean, the bow, sorry.
Yeah.
How do you hear Baba's voice?
You know, it's a really great question. So I've transitioned around this for many, 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 many years. The way I would try to get guidance from Baba, you know, when I was trying on my own, is I would ask Baba a question. Like, for example, I'd say, should I do this or should I do that? Right. And I would try to feel which felt better, which felt clearer, which felt more open. And I would take that as Baba's guidance. And I don't think I was wrong about that. I think that served me. And I think it helped me stay attuned to, from my point of view, my entire purpose at a spiritual level is to attune myself to Baba. I wrote an article about this in the Glow called "A Gift from Master to Man" about Baba and obedience that addresses this issue really deeply. So, if you'll allow me to kind of go a little bit into some of that, I think it'll give you a better answer to the question. So, from the Sufi perspective, the Sufis say there are 4 layers of the heart. The first layer of the heart they call the nafs, N-A-F-S, and the nafs is we might call the chatter of the mind. It's sort of just the thought patterns that are driven by desire. I like this, I don't like that. I want this, I don't want that kind of stuff. That's the first layer. The second layer are the emotions that are tied to that thought pattern. So it could be pleasure, it could be anger, it could be jealousy, it could be sadness, but they're all tied to desires. The third layer of the heart is where the layer where you actually start, according to the Sufis, where you actually start turning toward God. And actually, the word for heart in Arabic means that which turns. So the third layer, and what it means is the heart can turn toward the world or the heart can turn toward God. The heart is not one thing or the other. It has that quality of turning, but the third layer is where the heart actually starts to turn toward God, and it's where there starts to be capacity for receiving genuine guidance from God. And so what I learned through a lot of the Sufi healing work that I did, and this is not Sufism reoriented, by the way. People always wonder about that. It's not that path. It comes from a different lineage, totally different lineage. But what I learned is that the language of the heart is at the third layer is not words, but it's feeling. And so what I learned, and I have to tell you, this is not one and done. I'm continually having to work on this and refine it. But to realize that the way Baba speaks to me, I find, is through the feeling inside my heart, not a word or phrase or things like that. It's sort of like, if I say, what are you asking of me? For example, what are you asking of me in relationship to this person? if I can move, if I can travel into the third layer of my heart, I can actually feel a quality in the heart. It's not a word. It's not a do this, do that. It's an actual feeling. So, for example, if I said, what are you asking of me in relation to this person? I might feel a great openness and love and sort of a movement toward the person. That's to me how Baba speaks. Or I might feel a removal. I might feel like a feeling of holding back. The trick with this is always to know, what is it that's guiding me? Is it coming from the second layer of emotion driven by the first layer, or is it genuine, or have I actually traveled past that second layer into the third layer? And the only way to get into the third layer is through non-attachment. The only way to get there is to say to Baba, whatever guidance you give me, I will follow. And I'm committed to that. And once I have truly let go of saying it has to be this way or that way for me to accept it. But I said, no, Baba, I will accept whatever you say, I will accept. That is what I have found is the central condition for getting into that third layer, to be able to actually ask Baba, what are you asking of me? And to actually get the feeling that then guides me. So that's, I don't know if that answered your question. That's
Yeah, beautifully expressed. I mean, we're all kind of doing that, but that's a beautiful way of expressing it and describing it.
Yeah.
You know, rather than picking up the darkness from the world, you're picking up, like the moon, you're picking up the rays from the sun
Yeah.
at the heart level. No,
And Baba said, I don't speak with the language of the mind. I speak with the language of the heart. Well, the language of the heart is feeling, but it's not feeling. It's that distinction between that second and third layer is absolutely essential. There's a beautiful statement that I wish I could get my hands on it easily for you.
there's a line that that Baba says. Um, Emotion and energy are the creations. Uh-oh. No. Emotions and feeling. Well, no, I better pass on that.
If you'll just give me, Ken, I see your hand. If you'll give me one moment, I think I can come up with a quote from Baba, because I think it's a perfect quote for what I just said. Just give me a moment, because I know where it is.
Jeff, I think you're looking at the quote where it says, feelings and emotions are a creation of
The energy and mind.
mind and energy. Love is the creation of soul.
Yeah. But Daniel's making a distinction, I would say, between emotion and feeling. I mean, it's synonymous in English, but feeling is a deeper aspect, coming from love, and emotion is more from desire, connected with the world, you might say.
I don't think I can find it. I can't find it. Hang on just a second. Here it is. I'm going to read it, and then this is from Baba. When you feel something is intuitive and you have no doubt about it, then know it is real. Passing doubtful thoughts and temporary emotional feelings should not be given importance. But when you feel it touches your heart, follow it. When it is from the mind, it is not intuition. Intuition means that which comes from the heart. In the divine path, first there's intuition, then inspiration, then illumination, and finally realization. If it touches your heart, follow it. And God willing, from today, you will know if it is intuition, it is right.
Yeah.
And I think that's Baba's way of saying about the layers of the heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Hey, Daniel.
hey, yeah, good to
Good
see you.
to see you. It's interesting. Well, a couple of things quick. You familiar with this book? I don't know if you can see it.
I never
Husband?
saw it. I never saw it.
Yeah, you know, the only thing I really know about Sufi mysticism is from Baba's In God Speaks and things. And I was very interesting to see some of the history, a lot of those terms and back centuries, you know, where they came from. So it's if you can get through the first parts, there's a lot of interesting stuff in it. It's by famous woman Anna Marie Schimmel. Anyway, you might like that.
Okay.
But I just wanted to thank you for doing this. Good to see you and
Good to see you.
learn some more details. And listening to Baba, I find that if I can be in a peaceful, open, in the moment place, then it's almost just the natural moment to moment, you know, it is that intuition. Of course, it's not always in that place. And so what you're saying is important to just catch and say, wait, I'm stuck in my mind here. You know, I need to get down in my heart and feel what I'm feeling.
Yeah, it's a practice. What I found is it's a practice.
Yeah, over time, it becomes simpler in a sense.
Yeah. Hi, Peter.
Yeah, hi, Daniel. Hi. I have really no question that I could come up with in a short term, but having listened to you, I don't know if I really had known who you were at all. And it's interesting to see when I'm only vaguely familiar, your story. It was just amazing. And I'll tell you, it always awes me when I hear stories about how people go on treks, like the 150-mile treks, knocking on doors and begging for food. I don't know what that would be like. It is just, it awes me, people that have the ability or the calling to do that kind of thing. I mean, I've loved travel when I did it, but that, I'm not even sure. I'm really tired right now. I just woke up a little while ago. I work nights. I have a lot of stuff to do. I'm so tired or drained out, but it was awesome listening to you. And I can't think of any other words. No, nothing specific, but given time, I want to rewind and dissect what you said. It's interesting, the fine tuning and listening to Mayor Baba, how you did so. And it always, I can't make sense when people say I had no spiritual aspiration, but yet you go on this trek and it was particularly compelling to me when you talk about, well, let me just try saying his name and the floodgates open up. It's just incredible to me. It really is. And I really don't know what else to say. I just wanted to say thank you for being here. I'm glad I know you just a little bit more now, and be nice to expand on that a little bit. Thank you so much for sharing your story, J. Mayor Baba. Appreciate it greatly.
Hey, Baba.
Peter, come up to Myrtle Beach. You'll run into him.
Okay. And maybe soon.
Good.
Marian? Marian?
Very
Oh,
good.
Marion. Hi.
Hi.
Well, I'm so grateful to meet you. I don't have a real potent question, but I'm so grateful because I really so connect with you. And as a fellow traveler, brother, I live in New York City, and I pulled out my Be Here Now book, which is over 50 years old, and the cover has actually come off. So I keep it in a plastic. I keep it as a treasure in plastic, and I really appreciate your sharing it. And what comes to me is what about intuition is what Baba says in the discourses about we're here to balance the head and the heart, with the heart leading the way. That is intuition, and that is God. And it takes me a lot to balance those, because I tend to be very emotional. And I really resonated with what you said about your journey, about taking on others' views of you and trying to please others, because that was my task here now. And I've completed a lot of that now. So seeing you tonight, I just wanted to tell you, really supported me on my path of being able to kind of energetically resonate with you. And so I realize how that whatever we do in our lives, how it ripples out like a stone in the pond and just goes out forever. So I want to thank you for that so much.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Tony.
Hey, Tony.
Hi, Daniel.
Hey,
I
Tony.
just, I just wanted to say how much I enjoyed your story, and well, you know, we met. At least I remember in India. You were just picking up your daughter. I can see you vividly in front of the Pilgrim Center, and it was a very joyful time. But we never really got to know each other, and we have different mindsets in so significant ways. So to get a chance to really get to know you by hearing this is something I feel very grateful for. And also, you may or may not remember, but I know we had some exchange online, I believe, at some point, having to do, I won't even go into. And I know I was very harsh, and I'm going to take the opportunity to say, please forgive me. I am really
Forgiven.
I would think you probably had not a clue where it was coming from, but thank you. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Thank you. Thank you.
It's getting, you know, it's getting a little bit late. If there's, oh, well, we got Denver here.
Yeah, hello. Just
Hey,
Daniel, first wanted to thank you so much. I mean, what a great story of your journey, but packed with insights. I mean, that was so valuable, just so wonderful. And that quote that you read on intuition, I've heard that so many times, and I can't remember where it is. Where did you read it from?
Well, I can tell you where I read it from. It's from an article I wrote for the Globe called A Gift from Master to Man, which is actually about this whole topic that we're on.
Yeah.
It's from the spring 2018. Hang on a second, I might be able to tell you. Yeah, I've got it here. Let's see. 9. It was a statement made by Baba to a couple named Michael and Ann Kohinow on May 11th, 1952 in the Lagoon Cabin at Myrtle Beach.
Oh, wow.
I can't tell you where, I don't even know who those people are, but that's where it comes from.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know I've seen that quote somewhere in some book, and I've read it a number of times. So,
Yeah.
but I will look for that. I'm sure I have that spring 2018 edition of the Globe. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Before we go, if you could, if you could read that quote once again,
Yep.
see if there's anything more that people have to chime in. But it's worth hearing that because it's, you know, this is directly from Baba about the guidance that we can receive in our life.
When you feel something is intuitive and you have no doubt about it, then know it is real. Passing doubtful thoughts and temporary emotional feelings should not be given importance. But when you feel it touches your heart, follow it. When it is from the mind, it is not intuition. Intuition means that which comes from the heart. In the divine path, first there is intuition, then inspiration, then illumination, and finally realization. If it touches your heart, follow it. And God willing, from today, you will know that if it is intuition, it is right.
Beautiful. Yeah, well, shall we have a few moments of silence? Daniel, that was wonderful, really beautiful.
Thank you.
I said I was brain dead. I didn't know what we should come up with this week. Really, I couldn't, and then Daniel came to mind.
Yeah.
And Daniel, love your jacket.
This?
Love it. Love it.
Thank you.
Okay, let's have a few moments of silence. Jai Baba. Wow.
I have a question, Jeff.
Okay.
Um,
Come on.
I'm wondering if there will be webcasts of the programs from Maribod. I didn't find a link on the trust website. Do you know anything about that? If we'll be able to watch any of the programs from Maribod?
For the Amartithi programs, I
Yes.
think it's there, but some of these people are a little more computer savvy than I am.
I think they're dangling it to the last moment.
Yeah.
They'll put it up when it's available. Yeah.
Let's do.
Ralph, I posted a YouTube link for you in the chat that Angela posted on the Baba Zoom chat.
Oh, Baba Zoom chat.
No, I posted the link in this chat.
In my chat. You did, Dinku, to me?
Now, if you check the chat here, you'll find that link that Angela posted this morning.
Wonderful. Did you post it to me personally or to everyone?
Yeah, personally, but I can post it to everyone as well.
Okay, I better go download that. Jai Baba.
Jeff, I think
Dan's still with us.
Was raising her hand.
I'm still here, Ralph.
I'm sorry I missed your whole thing. I slept right. I fell asleep and just conked out, except for about the last 10 minutes. Jai Baba. I know you anyway.
Yeah.
Sue, did you have something?
We've slept together.
Yeah.
Sue, did you have something to say? Oh, well, you're silent. Muted.
Here we go. Jai Bob, everybody. I just happened to have an afternoon free, so it came off my calendar that this was happening because I never get to see it because I'm usually working. So thank you, Daniel. Good to see you.
Nice.
Welcome you back to Australia anytime.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
Yeah. Well, we're starting to think about inviting overseas guests again. We'll start planning the anniversary next month. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that'd be great. I love it.
What was I going to say? You can watch the Amartithi live. I think whoever sent the link, that's great. And I don't know if any of you know, but you do know this, that Baba's taking a lot of our special people swiftly away. And a Baba lover here, Peter Davies, died yesterday.
Wow.
If anybody knows him,
yeah,
he was one of the singers in the Love Street Singers. He and his wife Sonia were the first Westerners, along with Heather and Eriko, to live in India in 1971. So that's another loss for us all. But his story can be seen on Michael LePage's YouTube channel. It's a really great story, as was Daniel's. So if you have the time and the inclination, go to Michael LePage's YouTube channel, and he's posting stories of people's Baba stories on his channel, and they're just wonderful. So thank you, Jai Baba, everybody.
Thank you. Yeah, we didn't get to the bottom of Daniel Stone because he's been working with the trust in India on future plans for Meribad and Merazad, and also the center. But we'll have to get them another time, but we'll let them go to sleep now. But thank you. That was great.
It's great to be with you all. Thank you for inviting me, Jeff.
Yeah. We all have, like, we can entertain ourselves for the next 700 years with what we've got right here. Yeah.
True.
Anyway. Yeah. Jai Baba.
Jai Baba.
Good night, Jeff. Good night, Daniel.
Yeah.
Night. Great to see you guys.
Jai Baba.
Jai Baba. Thank you.
Jai Baba. Jai Mera Baba.
Hmm.